This is Jeannie Hebert-Brown, licensed clinical social worker, continuing with my story of parts of my life, and especially the parts of my life that led me towards being a social worker. If you have any questions or comments, you can text me at 619-997-1616. I grew up outside of Detroit, so I received an automatic acceptance to the University of Michigan, but I wanted to leave home and develop more independence and more self-confidence. I was considering going to Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, but when I got my acceptance letter, on the back, someone had typed, "You will have trouble with our math program." Not an auspicious beginning. Math has always been troubling for me. I see letters in my head, and when someone tells me a story about their life, it spools out like a little movie, which is helpful for a psychotherapist, but I cannot see numbers at all. This was one of the places that my father and I got into great difficulties because he was an engineer and he would tutor me at night in math. And we would start off, he would help me, and it would work out fine, but by the end of the evening, he would be yelling and I would be crying. It only seemed reasonable to me that math is a genetic skill, that this is something that you're born with. And I made up a diagnosis for myself. I called my diagnosis NDD, Numerical Deficiency Disorder. Then, when the new DSM came out, they actually have a math disability diagnosis called dyscalculia. And they say that dyscalculia is a learning disability that people are born with. People with dyscalculia have difficulties with number sense, memorization of basic math facts, and accurate and fluent calculations. I felt vindicated. After the letter from Antioch, I went to the library. They had a catalog filled with college catalogs, a filing cabinet filled with college catalogs. So I looked up all the colleges that did not have a math requirement, and I picked George Washington University because they had a math or science requirement, and I took geology. Also, serendipitously, when I got my MSW at San Diego State, they had two types of statistics classes, one where you manipulated numbers and one where you memorized information about famous statisticians. Well, I attended George Washington University from 1962 to 1966. As a freshman, I lived in the women's residence, Hattie Strong Hall. It had an 11 p.m. curfew and a dress code requiring that we could not leave the dorm unless we had a dress or a skirt. At that time, women were not admitted to the law school or the medical school, and the football team had all white players. The next season, the football team was integrated, and that's why the Southern Conference would not play GW, and that's why they played West Point, and that's when I met Rance Farrell, the captain of the track team, and dated him for a couple of years. It was a time when rights were under discussion in many aspects in life. My first experience demonstrating support by picketing was in 1962 in front of the Bank of America, wearing my wraparound skirt and casual pumps. We were handing out flyers saying that the Bank of America should divest themselves of the investments that they made in South Africa. Then, when the civil rights movement needed support, my friends and I would picket at the White House and then sit all night leaning on the White House fence, singing 1,000 verses of We Shall Overcome. I remember my American literature professor coming to class with the Washington Post in his hands the day of the murders in Selma, Alabama. He threw the paper against the wall and yelled, "This was an American history in the making, and what were we doing sitting in class?" By the time I graduated in 1966, we were living in a superdorm, a huge apartment complex that had been converted to dorms. Nominally, I was living on the girls' floor, but I knew that Andy had spent the entire semester in the suite at the end of the hall. Our RA was a woman who was in the law school. We had no curfew, and we all wore blue jeans. In October of 1967, I was still in Washington and participated in the large protest of the Vietnam War. We gathered at the Lincoln Memorial for anti-war speeches by the poet Robert Lowell and the baby doctor Benjamin Spock. Then thousands of us marched across the bridge to Virginia, where the Pentagon is located. The author Norman Mailer was there, and he wrote a book about the event called Armies of the Night. We were supposed to be levitating the Pentagon. The idea was to hold hands and encircle the Pentagon, then have some sort of symbolic act to levitate the Pentagon, which would demystify the authority of the military. But in the part where I ended up, there were not enough people to complete the circle, so my part of the Pentagon never got off the ground.